Masechet Baba Kama Daf Nun Aleph. We studied the Mishnah that gives 10 tefachim as the minimum depth of a bore that will kill an animal. Less than that can harm an animal, but it has to be 10 or more in order for the one who dug the pit to be liable if the animal dies. Now, we had a machloket, Rav and Shemuel, about what actually would kill an animal in such a pit. Rav says it's the fumes, not the impact. Right, so we're focusing on the fumes. Shemuel says either or. It could be killed either from the fumes or from the impact. All right, that's if it's 10 or more. Now, if it's less than 10, what we just said right before at the end of the daf is that there is hevel. If it's 10 or more, then the fumes will be a lot and can kill. But if the depth of the pit is less than 10, then there are still fumes, but they're not enough to kill, but they will cause damage. And so that explains the difference. Under 10 will cause damage, more than 10 will even kill. What we're going to discuss now until the next Mishnah is, what about in terms of impact, right? If you do take into account impact, which Shemuel does, then over there, is there also a difference between 10, more than 10 and less than 10, right? Does less than 10 do anything? Does it even cause damage? We're going to see Rav Nachman seems to say yes, but we're going to have three challenges against Rav Nachman, and we're going to end up saying no, that actually has to be 10 in order, not only in order to kill, but even to cause damage if it's from impact. So here we go. Hahu Torah dinfal la'arita de dala'e shachate mare tarfe Rav Nachman. Some person had an ox that fell into a water channel that was 1 amah deep. And so now it got damaged. And so the owner decided he's going to slaughter it and eat the meat because he was afraid that it would die. And if it dies, then it's not kosher and then it's worth very little money. So while it's alive and kicking, he slaughters it and then he assumes that he can at least eat the meat. However, he took it to Rav Nachman after he slaughtered it to ask, and Rav Nachman said, "What happened to it? It fell. It fell in this like an aqueduct was generally 1 cubit, 6 handbreadths deep." Only 6 handbreadths, that's less than 10. And Rav Nachman saw it and said, wait a second, if it fell, it might have gotten an injury such that would make it a terefa, that it would not, it would die within 12 months. And therefore, this is taref. This is not kosher. Sorry, you're not allowed to eat it, and you lost the major value of the animal. Okay, Amar Rav Nachman, Shakil mare dehai Torah kaba dekimcha ve'azal tena bemidrasha im shahata me'ayt la'et keshera la afsede leTorah deshave kama kabe. Rav Nachman reflected about this man, and he said, if only the owner of this ox would just pay a little bit of money for a cup of flour, take some bread, and go to the Bet Midrash. And then, in other words, if you just spent a little time in the Bet Midrash, it wouldn't cost him much, just the amount of bread that would sustain him in the meantime. If he went to the Bet Midrash and learned a little, he would learn the halacha that when an animal trips, all you have to do is wait 24 hours from the time. If it tripped at 3 p.m., wait till the next day at 3 p.m. And if the animal is still alive, then you can assume it is healthy. And then it would be kosher if you slaughter it after that. It would not be taref. That's the test. And so then I would not have to declare it taref, and he would gain a lot of money. The kosher animal meat is worth many kav. So if he just had a little patience, and the patience would have cost him just a little bit of bread till he waited that long. If he should have come and asked me before or learned this himself and waited 24 hours, and then the meat would have been kosher. But he rushed into it, and now we can't do that 24-hour test. So therefore, it's taref. That's the story. What did we learn from the story? Alma kasavar Rav Nachman, yesh chabata bepachot me'asara. It means that there is significant impact even if the hole is less than 10 tefachim deep. Here it was only 1 amah, only 6 tefachim, and yet Rav Nachman said, well, we have to worry that there could be some internal damage to some of the organs, even from falling a short amount, or just only 6 tefachim, and we have to assume it can be terefa because of that. So there you go. That's the thesis that we are deriving from Rav Nachman. In the end, we're going to reject this. But first, we're going to ask three questions. Iti be'rava leRav Nachman. Hayu pechutin masara tevachim. V'nafalo tocho shor o hamor umet patur. Rava is asking Rav Nachman from our Mishnah. It says, if there was less than 10 tevachim of depth in the pit, and an animal fell on it and died, the one who dug the pit is not liable because it's unusual for a pit that's so shallow to kill. Now, what is the reason why he's not liable? Is it not because there's no significant impact if it's less than 10 tefachim? And therefore, just like we assume it doesn't kill, it also should not cause it to be a terefa, the type of injury in that case. And that would go against Rav Nachman. And we answer not necessarily, la mishum delet behavla. The reason why the owner, the digger, is not liable is because if it's less than 10, there's insufficient fumes. And so we're going to follow Rav here. That's not because of impact, but rather because of fumes. Wait a second, then how come the Mishnah further says that if it got injured in less than 10, then one is liable? Doesn't that mean that there are fumes? And the answer to that is Amar le en hebel lemita v'yesh hebel linzakin. There's not enough fumes to kill it, but there are enough fumes to damage it. Same answer as we said before. Considering that we're going to end up rejecting this, it's not clear if the Amar le belongs here. Some versions don't have the Amar le, and it may be a copy from what came before. The point is Rav Nachman could say this within this line of reasoning. Okay, so in other words, from this source, it could be the damage can simply be from fumes. It doesn't say that that was because of impact. And so if there's 10 or more of depth, then Mishnah, according to the Mishnah, one is liable, because that's enough fumes to kill. If it's less than 10, then that's enough fumes to cause injury. But we can't learn anything from here about impact because we don't need to assume that the damage here happened because of impact. So we solved this challenge to Rav Nachman. Okay, so Rav Nachman is back. Yes, there can be damage because of impact. And then we're following Shemuel, that impact matters. Itibe bet hasikila haya gavoa shete komot vetane ala vekoma shelo hare kan shalosh veisa kadatech yesh chavata b'chod masara lama li kolehai. When the bet din declares that someone is liable to capital punishment through stoning, we don't take that literally that everyone throws stones upon him, but rather the bet din will take him up to a roof that's 2 stories high. And that's the Mishnah says. And the Braita says, and also you could add the height of that very person. When it says 2 stories high, I mean, the simple reading sounds like it's 2 floors. Well, how big is a floor? Whatever, 8 feet. Or so, but then we're adding the height of the person himself. So from there, it sounds like we're talking about 3 heights of people. Harekan shalosh, right? Let's say 6 feet about for each, and so 18 feet high. That's where his head would be, and he's thrown down, and his impact hits the floor. And if he dies from that, then that is stoned. If not, then they throw stones upon him after. That's the way it's done. Now, if you think that there is such a thing as damage from impact, even less than 10 tefachim, then why do you have to go all the way that so high, 3 stories high, 3 man heights high? Why do you have to go so much? Just push him off a small ledge, because you said, Rav Nachman, that there is a damage even less than 10 tefachim. So Rav Nachman has an easy answer. This is okay, and according to you, so what do you say? Everyone agrees that 10 tefachim is high enough that it causes significant damage, even death. So then why don't you throw him off just a 10 tefach thing? and then see what happens, right? I mean, that's right, because even according to you, 10 tefachim is sufficient, so it wouldn't have to be 18 feet high. Ela k'derav Nachman, damar Rav Nachman, amar Abba Abu, amar Kerav, ahavta l'recha kamocha, bero lo mitah yafa. Rather, we have to answer according to everyone, whether you follow Rav Nachman, that less than 10 tefachim does cause significant impact, or you follow everybody else, it has to be 10 tefachim or more. No matter what, 10 tefachim is not going to be sufficient for capital punishment because of something Rav Nachman himself said in the name of Abba Abu, that you have to love your fellow as yourself. One of the applications of this is that even during capital punishment, we're taking an evildoer, we're putting him away, and we're giving capital punishment. Still, the method of capital punishment should be in the best way, one that is the most compassionate. Even someone on death row deserves compassion in the way he is being killed, and therefore, if you push him off a short ledge, he's not going to die very quickly. Maybe he'll just break his arm or something, and then they're going to have to throw stones. It's going to be a prolonged process, and that's not a way to treat one's fellow man. Instead, we want it to be high up, right? Some 18, 20 feet high, so that it's more likely that he will die quickly, and that's the reason, right? It's true, 10 tefachim could kill an animal that falls into a pit, even less may cause injury, that's significant impact, but for capital punishment, we want to really be sure that he dies quickly, because, right, that's a way of showing our love to our neighbor. Whereas, and if so, why don't you make it even more? Why don't you throw him 100 feet high? Throw him off a cliff. Throw him off the Empire State Building. Then wouldn't that be so much nicer? You want to be nice to people. You want to do him a favor. And he says, no, that's not doing him a favor. Mishum de minaval, because then it will be the body will be disfigured. It'll be splat on the floor all over, and that's just too much. That's not necessary. We want to find the right balance between a death that will be quick and not prolonged in injury, but that will keep the body intact as much as possible, so that the human body, which is holy in God's image, will not be disgraced. Okay, very interesting. Anyway, so we solved that problem because the capital punishment requirement is completely different from the injury and death requirement in a bor. So third question, itibe. Ki pol hanofel mimenu velo betocho. There's a braita that says a person has to build a fence on his roof. Because if he doesn't, then someone may fall off of it. Mimenu will fall off the roof onto the ground, and you'll bring blood upon your house by doing that. Now that's the pasuk. Midrash says mimenu. We're worried that he will fall off the roof, from the roof, onto the ground, but not betocho, not onto the roof. Now, how could you fall onto a roof? Well, it would be, for example, if someone has a home that's dug underground, like a basement, but it's open to the street, and he can fall off of ground level down onto the roof. Right? If someone is living such that the ground level is above him, 10 tefachim, and his roof is dug down under the ground, you can have this in like a sloped area. Where you're digging something into the mountain, on the side of a mountain, and so someone above may fall below onto the roof. In that case, the homeowner is exempt. His responsibility is not to put a fence up on the street level, higher up, so people don't fall onto his roof. That's not his problem. However, if his roof goes up and like a usual house, and the street level is 10 tefachim or more below the roof, and someone falls because he didn't put a fence, then he is liable. That's the braita. Here's the question. Okay, forget about the basement one, just in a regular case. Why does it say here in this braita that it has to be that the roof is at least 10 tefachim above? If there is significant impact, even with less than 10, then you should require to put a fence, even if it's less than 10 tefachim high. Even if you have just a small ledge or a low porch, you have to put on there also. Amar le shane bayit echol pachot me'asara la bayitu. And the answer is, no, here, this is a law about a house. And the definition of a house is that it has to be at least 10 tefachim. How could you live in a house that the roof is less than tefachim high? You can't even fit in it. So similar to a sukkah. Although interestingly, regarding sukkah, when they ask why does it have to be 10 tefachim high as the minimal sukkah, it brings a completely different answer, that it's the height of the aron and the kaporet. There, that analogy seems to be saying that the sukkah is a holy space and trying to analogize it with the aron kodesh. That's a beautiful derasha. But here, the simple thing here is that a home has to be livable. You can't even stand in this home, but at least you can crouch in it. If it's less than 10 tefachim, then you wouldn't be able to even crouch or sit in it. So that's why, because if the law is a home law, and it's not a home if there's not 10 tefachim of space, of living space under the roof. This is, hold on, if your definition for when you have to put a fence on is that you need 10 tefachim of empty space, well then a 10 tefach high roof won't help, because you have to allow, if it's from the outside, right? There's outside measurements are different from inside measurements. If you ever worked with an architect, then you'll know that the walls take up space, the ceiling takes up space. So from the outside, it won't be 10, because you're going to have to remove the ceiling and the plaster, and even a 10 tefach high building from the outside will be less than 10 tefachim on the inside. So that means that kind of structure should not require a roof. So Nachman's answer is, no, we're talking about where the inside is hollowed out. It might be hollowed down an extra couple of tefachim, or whatever, however many inches. If the roof is 5 inches thick, then we're digging down 5 inches also, so that altogether there are 10 tefachim inside, and so in that situation you'd need to put a fence. We ask, as if so, if you're going to count the inside space, well then you can even have a situation where outside is less than 10 tefachim high, but inside is, because you dug even more down. Let's say you dig 5 tefachim down, and then the height is only 6 tefach above ground, and so that's a pretty low roof. What then? You're going to have to put a fence on it, even though it's closer to the ground, just because in the inside you dug down? That does not make sense. So we go back to the drawing board and say, you know what? Just like with that house, it has to be 10 tefachim above the ground in order for one to be liable, because the significant impact is defined as at least 10 tefachim above the ground. Less than 10 tefachim above the ground, there is not impact, right? We just don't worry about that. It does not cause a death. It does not even cause injury. So, Rav Nachman, why was he machmir in the case back we started with, when an animal fell and it was only 6 tefachim, that it fell down, and he said there may be injury. See, in that case, you can't say it's fumes, because he's worried about terefa. Fumes are not going to make it be a terefa. Only if it has a internal organ damage, external also. But you can see that. We're talking about a case where you can't tell from the outside, so we're worried that impact will have caused its lung or one of its organs to be damaged, so that it would be terefa. So in such a case, you can't say it's because of fumes. Rather, it has to be because of impact. And yet, Rav Nachman said, even with 6 tefachim, we do have to suspect that there is impact of injury. We said before, it's because he thinks that even less than 10 tefachim can cause damage. But that didn't work, because we had that third source that we could not reconcile. So we go back to the drawing board. Elahainu tamad Rav Nachman sabar mikiresad Torah la'ara kamahave. So actually, there's actually more space, because from the belly of the ox to the ground is how much? 4 tefachim, right? Go measure it. We're talking about an ox that's walking, and then it trips. It is already 4 tefachim of space between it and the ground level. And how deep is this water channel? It's 6. Hasara, you add 4 plus 6 and you get 10. So when it hits the ground, when its belly hits the ground, that's what we're worried about. That it will have internal damage in its torso. When its belly hits the ground, it's falling from a height of 10 tefachim, including the height from its of standing up from its legs. And so, in fact, even Rav Nachman agrees that impact, damage because of impact, is only from 10 tefachim and above. If something happens less than 10 tefachim, it could be injured from fumes, but there's no such thing as any significant impact causing death or injury from impact if it's less than 10. Good. Now we just have a follow-up question on that. In the Mishnah, it said, okay, we gave an example of bor that has to be deep enough that it can kill. That's 10 tefachim. So too, any other type of ditch and hole in the ground has to be deep enough that it can kill, which is 10 tefachim. Why are you saying that? Why don't you say 6 tefachim? Because if you include the height of the belly of the animal, that's already 4. So then it should be even 6 should be enough to kill it. The answer is that the Mishnah is assuming a case where the animal rolled into the pit. If it's rolling, it's on its back as it falls in, so it's already on the ground level. In that case, you need 10 tefachim of depth within the pit, because then it has to fall that far. But you're right, if it was standing and walking, then it already has 4 tefachim of height, and so in that case, if the board was only 6 tefachim deep, that would add up to 10, and the owner would still be liable. Next Mishnah, bor shel shne shutafin avad alav rishon velo kisahu, v'hasheni velo kisahu hasheni chayav. If you have a pit that belongs to 2 partners, the Gemara will discuss how you can share a pit. And the one of the partners passed by and did not cover it. And then the second one passed by and also did not cover it. Only the second guy is liable. This is like whoever uses the milk last is responsible to put it back in the refrigerator. So too here, although if the second guy had never passed by, the first one would be responsible. But once the second guy passes by, and he owns the pit, shared ownership of the pit, and so once he passes by and neglects to cover it, so he then becomes fully responsible. Amre, bor shel shne shutafin hechi mashkachad la. How could you have a case of a shared pit? הניחא אי סבירה לן כרבי מאיר, דאמר בור ברשותו חייב, משכחת לן, לה בחסר שניהם ובור ששניהם הפקירו רשותן ולא הפקירו בורן. If we follow Rabbi Akiva, who says that a pit in private domain, one is liable for, so then it's very easy. You have a pit that belongs to that is in a courtyard that belongs to both of them. 2 people share a courtyard, and they have a pit in there, and then they make ownerless the land so that people can walk on it, but they did not make ownerless the pit itself, and therefore now they're allowing people to come and walk, and they were and even leaving this, but even though they're leaving this hazard. So that's the case where you can have a pit that's owned by 2 people. But if we follow Rabbi Ishmael, who says that a pit in a private domain one is not liable for, so where is one liable for a pit? According to Bishmael, one is only liable if the pit is in the public domain. But how could you have shared ownership in the public domain? It's not like they can both share the street. Nobody owns the street. Maybe you'll say 2 people together hire, they each paid $50 together, and they said to someone, here, take this $100 and dig a pit in the middle of the street on our behalf, then that does not work, because we have a principle. There is no agency for a sin. If someone asks you to do a sin and you do it, you are responsible. The agent is responsible, not the sender. So in this case, if someone fell in, the guy who dug it would be responsible, not the people who paid him to do so. And if you have two people, one digs 5 tefachim, and the other one comes along and digs 5 tefachim, and that's how they share it, that doesn't work either, because it's the second person that digs that is responsible, because the second one that digs is the one that takes all the responsibility. Once he digs another 5, then the actions of the first one are ignored, because it's the second one that now made it as deep as it is, and the first one's not responsible at all. Now, this very topic about one person digging somewhat and the second person digging more is actually subject to a machloket, and we can have a partial answer depending on which side of the machloket we have. But first, we have to read the whole thing. I'm going to read all these paragraphs because we need the third paragraph to understand the first one. Hanicha l'Rabbi uvelinzakin mashkachat la, ela l'Rabbi ulmita ulabanan ben mita ben linzakin hechi mashkachat la. אמר רבי יוחנן, כגון שעקרו שניהם חוליה בבת אחת והשלימו לעשרה. מהי רבי ומהי רבנן? דתניא, אחד החופר בור 9, ובא אחר והשלימה לעשרה, האחרון חייב. רבי אומר, האחרון למיתה, ואחר שניהם לנזקין. So we say, we have an easy case according to Rabbi if we follow Nezek. Now, what did they say? It's this braita. This is what Rabbi and Rabbanan argue about. If one person comes along and digs 9 tefachim, and then the second person digs one more tefach to make it a full amount of 10, the second one is liable. Only the second one is liable fully for anything, whether it gets damage happens or death happens to the ox that falls in. Only the second one is liable. That's the opinion of Rabbanan. Rabbi, however, disagrees, and he says, it's true, I agree in part. If the animal dies, well, that's only because of the second one. It was only 9. 9 doesn't kill. 10 deep kills, and so you, the second guy, you made it 10, so you're fully responsible only for the death. However, if it only gets damaged, well, a pit that's less than 10, even if it were only 9, it could get damaged, and therefore both of them are responsible. Even the one who only dug 9, that could cause damage, and then you made a 10. That made it a little bit worse. Both are responsible. That's the opinion of Rabbi. So back to our question: how can we have a jointly owned pit in the Shut Harabim? Well, we can have it according to Rabbi if only injury happened, then because both are responsible in that case, as we just said. But if the animal died, according to the Rabbi, then only the second one's responsible. And according to the Banan, whether it died or whether it got injured, only the second one is responsible. So how could you ever have a case where you have joint responsibility for a pit? And the Yochanan answers, we're talking about a case where they jointly extracted a chunk of earth simultaneously, right? They're digging, and then at the bottom, there's this big chunk of earth that makes it the final thing, and they both take it out to make it 10 tefachim, and so therefore, since they did it together at the same time, they are both responsible. That's the case of the Mishnah, that whoever doesn't cover it last is the one that will end up being responsible. Good. Now that we mentioned this baraita, let's find the source. How does Rabbanan know that only the second one is liable? Damar kera ki yiftach v'chi yichreh im al peticha chayav al kriya lo kol sheken ela lavi koreh achar koreh shisilek maaseh rishon. Since the pasuk is doubled and says if someone opens a pit or if he digs a pit, why do I need both? If he's liable just by uncovering a pit, certainly he's liable if he digs a pit. So the double language instead comes to teach me that if someone digs 9 and then someone digs more 10, that the second digger undoes the action of the first, and the second one is fully responsible. That's the opinion of Rabbanan. Wait a second, Rabbi said we already used this double language. Remember in the previous daf where we used it to teach that a board in the Shut Harabim is one who is responsible. You don't also have to own the land. So we already used this up. So good question. Rabbanan also, they also use this for that other teaching, so we cannot use it here again. So back to the drawing board, Rabbanan actually learned their halacha from the following. Pasuk ish board ehad velo shenayim. Pasuk says, if a man, in singular, so only one person can be responsible, not two people. That's why it has to be the second and not the first. Nahumi ba'eleh ki ichre ish bor velo shor bor. The Nabi says, no, I need that word ish to teach me that only if a human digs a pit, the human is liable. But if someone's ox digs a pit, the owner of the ox is not liable. So I already used that for something else. V'Rabbanan, today ish bor ketibi. Rabbanan says the word ish twice. Ki ichre ish and ki yiftach ish. So I can use one for this and one for that. Rabbi, I did ketav hai ketav hai. Rabbi said, no, you can't learn from that. It said one ish to teach me only if a human digs it and not if an ox digs it. But then it has to be parallel. Once it says ish, ki chre ish, and then ki yiftach ish, it just has to say ish again, just because it wouldn't be syntactically correct if you didn't have it there. But I can't learn anything from it. Now, okay, fine. I know that it says ish, and that's how we know that when the second person is also liable, right? That one person is liable, ish, not one and not two. But how do you know which one? Maybe only the first one is liable. How do you know the second guy who dug it more is liable? Because in the rest of the pasuk it says the carcass will be belongs to him. Now, who's him? Obviously, the one who caused it to die. That would be the second one who dug it more, and because of him, it dies. So he gets he gets the carcass because he has to pay fully. So it makes sense. V'hai hamet ihielo miba'ele lichderava damarava shor pesule muktashin shenafal labor patur shenemar v'hamet ihielo b'misha met shelo. Hold on, you're learning from this section of the pasuk that he keeps the carcass. We already used that for a different drasha, as Rava taught. If you have an ox, that the ox that fell in was muktashin, it was declared to be a sacrifice, but then it got a blemish in it, in which case you can't make it as a sacrifice, but the owner also cannot use it. So it's something that cannot be, has restrictions on how it can be used. If that's the one that fell in, then the owner of the pit, the digger, does not have to pay, because the pasuk says, and the carcass will be his. Only in a case where the digger can keep the carcass and use it for himself, then he has to pay. But in a case like this, where there are restrictions on the use of the carcass, in that case, the digger does not have to pay. That's what we learned from here. Hamet yihielo. So I already used it for something else. I can't use it for this. The sages could say, listen, you know what? Fine, I'll agree with that. I don't need a pasuk because this is just logical that the one that caused it to die, the one that dug it more, so that now it's 10 tefachim and now it can die. It makes sense that person would be the one responsible. So from all I need is a pasuk that says ish to say that one person is responsible, not two. And now if you're going to choose between the two, it's not going to be the first because he only dug it 9. Obviously, it's going to be the second because he dug it more. Tenor Rabbanan. Now we're going to extend this to see how it applies to other cases of two people, one digging somewhat and other digging more. One person comes and digs 10. So already at that point, it can kill. So it's different from the one before where one made it 9 and the second one made it 10. Here, the first one already made it 10. The second one just came and made it 20. But already at 10, it could have killed. And then the third person comes and he made it 30. And then something falls in and dies. All of them are liable because even if just with the first one, that was sufficient to cause it to die. Now we have a contradiction. If one person digs a pit, that's 10. That already can kill. The second one came and added plaster and cement. but which, as we're going to see, adds fumes, but it keeps the level the same, the second one only is liable. Well, why is the second one only liable? How come it's not the same as this case where if you have two people, if you made it 10 and then 20, both can kill, so both are liable. Here also, one guy made it 10, the other one kept it 10 and added cement and fumes. So, but it's the first one should also be liable. Because he made it 10. So how can we deal with this contradiction? Well, a few ways. We can say that the first Baraita is the opinion of Rabbi, who says that multiple people are liable, and the second one is Rabbanan, who say no, only the last one is liable, and he says it not only in the case where it was 9 plus 1, but even if it was 10 plus cement, he would say not liable, or only the second one is liable in all cases. Amar of Zavid, Rabbanan. Now Zavid, I have another answer. I can explain all of them according to Rabbanan. Ad kan lakam Rabbanan acharon chayav ela hechadela avad kama shiur mita. Rabbanan only said patur in the previous case where it was 9 plus 1, because the first guy did not dig it sufficiently that it would cause death. Only the second guy did that, so that's why the first guy is off the hook. But in the case where one guy made it 10 and then the other guy made it 20, already by the time it was 10, it could have killed. So even the rabbis would agree that everybody, the 10, 20, and 30 guys, they're all liable. Wait a second. I explains the first one, but how about the second one? In the second baraita also, the first guy dug it 10, so he should be liable also. But then baraita said only the second guy who added cement is chayav. Why? If Rabbanan would agree that if the first guy causes a death trap, then he's liable also. Or there we're talking about a case where the first guy who dug it 10, he's true he dug it 10, but there were no fumes in it, not fumes that would cause a death. So really that would not have caused the death. The second guy came, and by adding cement, that caused a lot of fumes, and he's the one is solely responsible. So this actually does fit into the formula, and assuming that it did die from the fumes, so then we can see that only the second guy was responsible. Or a third way of reconciling two, but I thought Amar Zavid, have a B, both of them are to be that says that multiple people can be chayav, even if it's 9 and 1. So certainly if it's 10, 20, and 30, all will be liable. So that makes sense. The second baraita, this is only the second guy. The cement guy is chayav. Why? Talking about a case, similarly, that the first guy, when he dug 10, it did not have fumes, not fumes that would cause death, or not even for damage. So therefore, that guy's off the hook. It wouldn't cause anything, right? We're assuming here, like Rav, that impact doesn't do anything, right? He's not liable for impact, but only for fumes. And here, there were no fumes. The second guy added cement, added fumes, both, whether to kill it or fumes to damage it, and that's why only the second guy is liable in that case. Amar Rava, hiniach even al pi habor v'shlimaha la'asara banu machloket Rabbi v'Rabbanan. Now Rava says another variation. What if there was there was a pit, one guy made it 9. A second guy comes, instead of digging down another one, he puts stones on the top, so that he elevates the opening, the rim of the pit 1 tefach. Now the person that falls in will, he'll have to step on that ledge and then fall. He will still fall 10. But it's not by going down, but by going up. Rava says this is the same machloket as the other case. There's no difference. Rabbi would say that both of them are liable, and Rabbanan would say only the second guy is liable. The Gemara asks, Peshita, isn't that obvious? Why would you think that this case would be different than the standard case? kakatil emala kamash malan, because I might have thought only when you dig down, you dig 9 and then another down, where that when you go down, that's where the bad fumes are. So you could say that the guy that added another tefach, it's his fumes by going down 1 is what killed him. But you might have thought that if you go above ground and add a ledge where there's no fumes, then the second guy would not be liable, and therefore has to teach us that even if you go up, it's the second guy that will be, the second guy is liable, both for Rabbi and Rabbanan. They both hold the second guy liable, and so that's the Chidush, and in that case, Rabbi would hold also the first guy liable, and Rabbanan would say, no, once the second guy comes, the first guy is off the hook, but both think that going up and going extra more down is the same. Rava has one more dilemma on this subject. Tam tefach v'silek avanav mahu. You had the first guy came and he made a 9 tefach hole, and now a second guy comes and he digs it 10, one more, but then he closes it back up. Or if there was 9 before, he came and added a rim of stones above, making it 10, but then he removed the stones. So he made it worse, but then he undid what he did, right? Control Z, undo. So does it count? Mahu, mi amrinan maida abad shakle. Do we say, what he put, he removed. So it's as if he never came, and therefore only the first guy is responsible, and not the second guy. Or dilma nistaliku ma'aseh rishon v'kama le kule b'rshuteh teko. Or do we say that once the second guy gets involved, so then the responsibility of the first guy leaves and only the second guy is responsible? That's it. Once he digs 10 or adds a rim, he's responsible, and just because he changes it back after does not help him, and we leave this question standing. Next, we're going to bring up even more variations on cases with pits, and this time we're going to add water as a factor. Water is going to add more fumes, the stuff that grows in the water and will cause lethal fumes. Amar Rabba bar bar Hana Amar Shmuel bar Marta bor shemona umehen shene tefachim mayim hayav ma'itama kol tefach demaya kitzeh deyabasha dameh. If you have a pit that's only 8 tefachim deep, but 2 of those 8 are filled with water, 1 is liable. Why? Because every 1 tefach of water counts as 2 of empty space. Again, because water is going to have algae and stuff growing in it, that's going to cause bad fumes, doubly, twice as bad as empty space. Okay, so that we know, if in that ratio, right, 8 and 2 is going to add up to 10. 8, of which 2 is water. The water counts as double. But what about other ratios? Is it the same? Let's say you have 9 tefachim deep and 1 tefach of water. So the question is, do we say that, well, there's not so much water, so there's less fumes? Maybe only in the previous case where there's 2 tefachim of water, that has a lot of fumes, and we count each one as double. But here, where there's less water, maybe it's less than double. So it would not be liable. Or on the other hand, it's true there's only 1 tefach of water, but there's an extra tefach of empty space. Now there's 9 of empty space. There's not 8 of empty space and 1 of water. And so that there's 9 tefachim altogether. 1 of them is water. So since there's 9 tefachim altogether, it's deeper than this one, which was only 8. So maybe that is equal to the extra tefach of water here, and the ratio still counts because it's deeper. And so 1 tefach will count as 2, and then 1 would be liable. A good question. Bor shib'a umehen shelosha tefachim mayim mahu. Or what if we go the other way? The whole thing is 7 tefachim deep, and 3 of the 7 is water. Do we say we still keep the 1-to-2 ratio, and the 3 tefachim of water counts double, and that therefore it's the same as 10? and that would kill, and one is liable. Or do we say, yeah, but it's not as deep as this one, right? You need depth also, and if it's not as deep, even though there's a lot of water, it will not kill. Teko, we leave these two questions unresolved. What if the first person makes something that's 10 tefach? Second person comes along and makes it wider. What about that guy? So the response is, Rav Shizbi asked Rabbah. So Rabbah answers, he made less fumes, because now that it's wider, the fumes can spread out more and be dissipated. And so the second one is not liable. He, in fact, improved the situation. But Rav Shizbi says, no, opposite. He brought the hazard closer, right? Let's say he digs it on the north side. So now any animal coming from the north side will fall in sooner. He might not have fallen in if he didn't extend the width. So he is responsible. Ela amar Rav Ashe nechze anan I behabla mayit hare mi'ay tavla I bechabata mayit hare kereb hazaka. So Rav Ashe comes to make a compromise between these two. He says, you're both right. Well, let's see. It depends how the animal dies. If it dies from fumes, well, then he made the fumes less. So the second guy should not be liable, only the first guy. But if it died out of impact, well, then this guy caused the hole to be closer to where the animal is walking and made it easier for it to fall in. And so the second guy would be liable. Or ikadamre, another version of Rav Ashe, Amar Rav Ashe, nechzanan. We say if the animal walked from the north side where he extended its width, then he caused it to fall. Otherwise, it might not have fallen at all. So then the second guy is responsible. But if it came from the south side where he didn't change the edge of the border of the board there, then the second guy would not be liable, because by extending it on the other side, he actually decreased the fumes and so is not liable. Itemar bor shomka kerochba Rabba v'Rav Yosef damre tarvayu mishmed Rabba bar Chana damre mishmed Rabbi Maneh. So what if you have a pit that's exactly the depth is exactly equal to the width? It's a square. What about that ratio in terms of fumes? So this is going to be a machloket between Rabba and Rav Yosef, both of whom quote their teacher, Rabba bar Chana, who was quoting Rabbi Maneh. These names are going to come up again in the very next statement. So anyway, there's a machloket of the students, what the teacher said between Rabba and Rav Yosef. One of them, Hadamad le'olam yesh bahebel, ad shehe rochba yater al omka. One said that a pit will have fumes unless its width is greater than its depth. If the width is greater than the depth, then it's okay. That means if it's equal, then it's liable, it's a problem. However, the other version says, This one says, no, there is no problem of fumes unless the depth is greater than the width. So if it's equal, then it's okay, right? It's only a problem, right? There is no hevel unless. So there is hevel if this is a double negative. There is hevel if its depth is greater than the width, but if it's not, if it's equal, then it's okay, and the owner would not be liable. Okay, now avad alav harishon velo chisahu. Back to the Mishnah. The first one, back to this one that they both dug. Let's say they dug it together. At the same time, they pulled out the last tefach together. The first guy passed it, did not cover it. The second guy the second partner did not cover it. Only the second one is liable. So we ask, V'rishon me'emat mipatar, from which point exactly is the first guy no longer liable? When do they transfer the chain of responsibility? At precisely what moment? Rabba v'Rav Yosef damre tarvayu mishmeh de Rabba bar Chana damre mishmeh de Rabbi Maneh. Okay, same attributions, same two students who have two different versions of what their teacher said. Chad amar mishe manicho mishtamesh, v'chad amar mishe yimsor lo dilyo. The first opinion says when the first partner leaves, when he walks away, while the second guy is using it. Okay, so it's when he walks away. That's it. It's all yours. Whereas the other opinion says it's when he takes the bucket and transfers the bucket. Here, okay, now I was using it, now you are using it, even if he is still standing there. Okay, this machloket between these two students parallels a machloket between two Tanaim. Ketana'eh, hamadle ma'im min habor, uba chaverov amar lo, hanach li v'ani edle ma'im, kevan shenicho mishtamesh patur. One person is drawing up water from a cistern, and the second person comes and says, I would like to draw also. Once the first person leaves, while the second person is using the cistern, that's it, he's patur. So that's the point that he leaves the area. Where that's Tanakama. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov omer mishim sor lo dilyo. Rabbi Eliezer says it's when he conveys the bucket. So he gives the bucket to the second person, even if he is still standing there. So you see that this is exactly the same language. So the Machoket Amoraim and Tanaim are parallel. B'mai kami palge. What is at the root of their Machloket? Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov sabar yesh berera. Hai medide ka memale v'hai medide ka memale. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says there is designation. Whether this has to be retroactive designation or not is discussed by the Rishonim. But the point is that we view the water in the pit as if it's separated, right? This is half is your water, half is your water, and person A, whatever he draws up, right, this is now designated as his own water, and whatever is drawn by the second guy is designated all as the second guy's water. So if the water inside is split up itself, it will be retroactive if it's all mixed up. So whatever you end up drawing, that's yours, meaning at the time that you are drawing water, it's your pit. So the only significant thing is who has the bucket. So once I pass the bucket to you, so then that's it. It leaves mine. And now whatever you draw is going to be yours, and that's why passing the bucket is a significant act. Whereas Rabbanan sabre and berera, Rabbanan say all the water is jointly shared by both of us, and therefore, as long as I'm still standing around, I am there, and so I will be responsible. Even though you're drawing who cares who's drawing the water? As long as we're both there, it's our joint water, so we're both responsible. If I want to not have responsibility, I have to leave the area, and then you're the only one there. So that's why you are responsible, because the water itself does not get retroactively designated. Amar Rabina, v'azdu l'ta'amayhu ditnan, hashutafin shenadru hana'a ze mizeh, asulin nikanes lechaser. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov omer, ze nichnas letoch shelo, v'ze nichnas letoch shelo. The machloket here regarding the whether we designate the water as two parts or it's shared, matches the machloket between these same two Tanaim in another Mishnah in Masechet Nedarim. That if you have two partners, they both own a yard together, and they make a vow that says, I'm not going to have any benefit from you, and the other one also says, no, I'm not going to have any benefit from you. So then each not allowed to have any benefit for each other. Tanakama says they both can't go into the yard, because if I go into the yard, I'm benefiting from your share of the yard, and vice versa. That's Tanakama, who says en berera, that it's not retroactively designated. We both own all of the yard. But Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says that I can go to my part and you go to your part. I'll enter, and wherever I enter, I'll go to this 50% of it until this line. So that will be retroactively designated as mine, and the part that you use will be retroactively designated as yours, and thereby I am not benefiting from you, and you are not benefiting from me. As the Gemara explains, what's that essence of their machloket? Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov sabar yesh berera, hayed nefshe ayer v'han nefshe ayer, Rabbanan sabre en berera. Ben Yaakov says we do retroactively designate that this now is my land, my half, and that is your half. We put a piece of tape down the middle. Whereas Rabbanan says no, you can't retroactively designate it at the time time when you buy it, you can say, I'm going to use this part, but not that part. But now, just because you made a neder against each other, we don't retroactively say, this is yours and this is mine. Rather, the whole thing is owned jointly by both, and therefore neither can enter any part of the yard. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.